Let us pray. Almighty God, as we have come together to begin our meeting of the Assembly, we humbly beseech you to grant to all our members the light and guidance of your Holy Spirit, that we may wisely take counsel together and come to such decisions and shall promote your glory and the well-being of all our citizens in this our land, so that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be enjoyed by all people. Grant this for the sake of Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. I now invite nominations for the position of Youth Premier, Tobago Youth Assembly.
I beg to nominate Jamon Martin as Youth Premier, Tobago Youth Assembly.
Are there any other nominations?
I beg to second this nomination.
Since there are no other nominations, I now declare Jamon Madden duly elected by acclamation Youth Premier, Tobago Youth Assembly.
I, Jamon Madden, do swear by Almighty God that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago and will uphold the Constitution and the law, that I will conscientiously, impartially, and to the best of my ability discharge my duties as Premier and do right to all manner of people without fear or favor, affection, or ill will.
I now invite nominations for the position of Deputy Youth Premier, Tobago Youth Assembly. After consultations with the Youth Premier, Mrs. Aliyah Holder, Mr. Alex Job Thomas, and Ms. Denisha Manning have been appointed and nominated youth councillors. I have also been appointed youth councillors. I, Delano Drewfield, Youth Speaker, Tobago Youth Assembly, acting in accordance with the advice of the Youth Premier, Tobago Youth Assembly, do hereby appoint you, Ms. Aliyah Holder, Youth Councillor, Tobago Youth Assembly.
I, Aliyah Holder, having been appointed a youth councillor for Tobago, do swear by Almighty God that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago and will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge the duties and responsibilities of councillor that I am now about to assume.
I, Delano Jofield, Youth Speaker, Tobago Youth Assembly, acting in accordance with the advice of the Youth Premier, Tobago Youth Assembly, do hereby appoint you, Alex Job Thomas, Youth Councillor, Tobago Youth Assembly.
I, Alex Job Thomas, having been appointed a youth councillor for Tobago, do swear by Almighty God that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, and will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge the duties and responsibilities of councillor that I am now about to assume.
I, Delano Jofield, Youth Speaker, Tobago Youth Assembly, acting in accordance with the advice of the Youth Premier, Tobago Youth Assembly, do hereby appoint you, Denisha Manning, Youth Councillor, Tobago Youth Assembly.
I, Denisha Manning, having been appointed a youth councillor for Tobago, do swear by Almighty God that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago and will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge my duties and responsibilities of councillor that I am now about to assume.
The Tobago Youth Assembly is a collaborative initiative between the Division of Sport and Youth Affairs, the Assembly Legislature, and the Tobago Youth Council. It is a voluntary program that reflects the composition of the current Tobago House of Assembly. However, it should be noted that the Tobago Youth Assembly does not consist of a majority or minority side, and is an apolitical, non-partisan program. The Tobago Youth Assembly currently includes a youth speaker, a youth secretariat, 4 appointed youth councillors, and 12 elected assemblymen, including a youth premier, deputy youth premier, and a deputy youth speaker. The Tobago Youth Assembly is set to take place annually, with the term of office being 1 year, therefore creating yet another opportunity for young persons to make a positive difference on the island and contribute towards the creation of a better Tobago for all. On this, the fourth and final sitting of the Tobago Youth Assembly 2020-2021, following the inaugural sitting in December of 2020, an extensive period of virtual training sessions, and TYA plenary sittings in April and September of this year. We are pleased to be on record as young persons in Tobago, leading the way with excellence, successfully participating in consecutive youth sittings in this assembly chamber. And as this term of office comes to an end, young citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, between the ages of 15 to 24 years, residing in Tobago, are encouraged to participate in this program. The Tobago Youth Assembly aims to give you, the young persons, a voice on issues while allowing you to contribute to your overall growth and development, thereby fostering a sense of civic responsibility among the island's youth. Participants will be able to table motions and discuss policies. We in the Youth Assembly also join with members of the Tobago population in celebrating Tobago Day 2021. Tomorrow, December 4th, 2021, marks 41 years of the Tobago House of Assembly's existence as a democratic institution that has responsibility for the island's administration and matters connecting therewith. Tobago Day, previously known as Assembly Day, is a celebration of the Tobago House of Assembly that signifies the strength of this island's democracy, the advancement of entrepreneurship on the island, and the preservation of Tobago's indigenous heritage and identity. All positive ingredients for self-determination and advancement. The THA is an entity that the people of Tobago take pride in, as it provides them the opportunity to manage their own affairs and select suitable candidates for various positions. It makes the population of Tobago feel closer to how they are governed. And so, standing on the backs of those who would have paved the way for this great institution and those who are currently in charge of its management, we in the Tobago Youth Assembly say, Happy Tobago Day to the dynamic youth population of Tobago and all its citizens. Honor and reverence is also paid to the memory of William Mackenzie, an assemblyman of the re-established 1980 Tobago House of Assembly, who passed away in November. It is on the fundamental works of pioneers like himself that this assembly stands and blazes into the future. We also acknowledge and honor one of our very own assemblymen for Roxborough Dallaford, Mrs. Janae Campbell. Congratulations on your outstanding performance and achievements at the National Youth Parliament 2021. Ms. Campbell, we support you and encourage you to continue with your wonderful works. You have done an excellent job of representing yourself and the entire youth population of Tobago. Job well done. Additionally, at this time, the members of the Tobago Youth Assembly 2020-2021 and its stakeholders continue to remind persons and citizens of Tobago and Trinidad and Tobago to ensure that you do your part to fight the COVID-19 virus. Continue to strictly adhere to all health protocols outlined at this time, for it is only effective when we all do our part, because we all have a responsibility to help protect each other as we look forward to a bright and productive future as proud and productive citizens. I thank you.
Assembly bills sent back from Cabinet, Assembly laws brought back from Parliament, petitions, papers, presentation of reports from Dispute Resolution Commission Select Committees, questions to secretaries, requests for leave to move the adjournment of the Tobago Youth Assembly on definite matters of urgent public importance, statements by secretaries or assistant secretaries, Personal explanations. Introductions of bills. Motions relating to the business or sittings of the Assembly and moved by a secretary or assistant secretary. Public business.
Youth Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to enter this debate. I beg to move the following motion constructed in my designation. Whereas self-governance would aid in further developing all sectors of Tobago, including our cultural identity as an island. And whereas the results of the THA January 2021 election caused an increase in consciousness and advocacy for self-governance among the Tobago population. And whereas self-governance will endorse a Tobago-centric approach to the way history is taught in the school curriculum. Be it resolved that the Tobago Youth Assembly advocate for the development of a framework that seeks to highlight the benefits of how governance affects Tobago. And be it resolved that a report be submitted to the respective line divisions for considerations and statements to be laid in the House within 6 months.
Members, the question is, whereas self-governance would aid in further developing all sectors of Tobago, including our cultural identity as an island, and whereas the results of the THA January 2021 election has caused an increase in consciousness and advocacy for self-governance among the Tobago population, and whereas self-governance will endorse a Tobago-centric approach to the way history is taught in the school curriculum, be it resolved that the Tobago Youth Assembly advocate for the development of a framework that seeks to highlight the benefits of self-governance in Tobago. And be it further resolved that a report be submitted to the respective line divisions for consideration as statements to be laid in the House within 6 months. Member for Scarborough-Codler Hall.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for allowing me to enter this debate once again. Now, as the Youth Premier, crafting and bringing this motion to the House today, I had to ask myself some questions while writing this speech. Now, the first question in which I asked myself was, Jamon, what is self-governance? Now, instead of browsing Google for some cliche definition, I reiterated and asked once more, Jamon, what truly is self-governance? You know, we as Tobagonians oftentimes see self-governance as mere governmental principles, our own government, or self-rule. Now, Mr. Speaker, something still was not clicking with that synopsis. Quite frankly, I was not fulfilled with that definition. There has to be more, I said to myself. Soon after, a chain of thought propelled me to ask myself a series of questions. How does self-governance influence us as a people? Now, in asking myself that question, it propelled me to put away the governmental and political aspect and briefly concentrate on the effect it has on us Tobagonians. Once again, I asked myself, but how does self-governance influence our cultural identity? How is it that after 12 years in formal education, students have no idea about basic Tobago history? Now, some may say, Well, boy, them fully done. That is their fault. But is it really? Is it truly their fault that when given a history assignment, we have to go behind God's closet to access basic information on Tobago history? Is it truly their fault that we have to find Tanti up the road to explain the history of Scarborough due to lack of documentation and literature about Tobago's history in our public libraries? I ask once more. But if crucial history is not being documented, what will happen when Tanti and Uncle dead and gone? Will we reach a stage where our history is literally lost, Mr. Speaker? My colleagues, the Tobago Heritage Festivals are not enough. We have to reach a point where our history is a part of us. That's the only way we would truly value it. It has to be a part of our day-to-day living, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the lack of self-governance has clearly proven to be a heavy hindrance to our development as a people. Every local school curriculum has been heavily bombarded with Trinidad-centric history, isolating our Tobago identity. One can never go forward without going back, Mr. Speaker. Same can be said for a nation. Why am I reading a book about Tobago in Big 2021 and 80% of the information is about Trinidad, Jamaica, and Barbados? Why? Is our history that unimportant and futile? Or is it that the lack of advocacy and representation of our own government elect over the decades are finally coming back to bite us? And to the politically aligned, no fingers are being pointed here. All previous governments have failed, as it is quite evident that they do not care about our history. You have made the preservation of our unique Tobago history a political narrative instead of an all-rounded necessity. Shame on you all. Mr. Speaker, self-governance gives us an internal right to self-determination. We must be able to highlight the gems of Tobago and develop them to make our tourism sector flourish. The problem isn't that Tobago lacks resources and destinations. The problem is that frameworks and routes aren't developed to properly enjoy and get the best out of these offerings in various sectors. In other words, our resources are hidden and heavily underutilized. With the implementation of self-governance, Tobago will be able to make its own laws. Tobago also would get not less than 6.8% of the annual budget appropriation. The Tobago Executive Council will be able to borrow money locally and internationally as it deems necessary. The Executive Council would also have the power to invest Tobago's money after receiving approval from right there, the Tobago legislature. Tobagonians, we have to start to want more for ourselves, and only we can ensure that. We have to ask ourselves, are we truly comfortable with mediocrity? Why is it that mommy have to go down Trinidad to pack a van back for groceries and other basic necessities for the Christmas season instead of shopping right here in Tobago? Mr. Speaker, something isn't right. Why is it that as a young athlete I have to go down Trinidad for a cheap pair of spikes? And it's not that I don't want to support our Tobago businesses, but the truth is we as youths genuinely can't afford it. So where do we go? Down Trinidad to spend our money. Mr. Speaker, something isn't right. 115 square miles of raw potential and we could barely find an affordable and worthwhile spot catered to our budgets. Once again, Mr. Speaker, something isn't right. Mr. Speaker, we are in need of a proper and balanced private sector. In fact, we are in need of an actual private sector. The private sector is an important player in the economy due to the input it makes to the national income. Particularly, it delivers vital goods and services, contributes to tax revenues, and ensures the efficient flow of capital. Tobago, the truth is that a blind man can see that without a private sector, we are slowly making ourselves the tax capital of the Caribbean. In no absolute logic, Is it right for someone to be paying twice the amount for a bottle of water than their Republic counterpart? Tell me if that making sense. Tobago, we deserve the water parks and amusement parks too. We deserve the Chuck E. Cheese too for our children. The truth is we're in a generation where we young people don't like to work for nobody, and we want to control our own destiny. But how can you control your destiny under a governance framework which heavily promotes brain drain and paycheck-to-paycheck living? And young people, dreaming big doesn't mean you're being unrealistic. It just means you genuinely want better for yourselves. It is possible. Other Caribbean countries are doing it. Tobago, we must come out of that mindset that every nickel make a muckle, as we say in Jamaica, and aim to facilitate large-scale development. We must start to compete with other Caribbean economies. Oil is not enough. All sectors must thrive. We must reach to a place where private companies like Uber genuinely want to come here and invest, as we are seeing in Bahamas and Jamaica. Barbados is investing in the metaverse and choosing national heroes. But what are we doing here? I leave you to answer that. It's almost as if we are living 10 years back, Mr. Speaker. Countries with significantly less fiscal budget allocations are outdoing us by a milestone. For far too long, we have all avoided this issue. And I now call upon the government and all political parties to see this as a cry for help from the youths of Tobago. And as we continue this debate today, let us be passionate about our points of views, represent the youths, and speak boldly to inspire change. It is the duty of the youth to war against indiscipline, corruption, and incompetency. Because why? We are the leaders of tomorrow. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. Marianne Williamson. Mr. Speaker, much obliged.
Member for Canaan Bonaccord.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to join in this debate. We often say, when your neighbor's house is on fire, wet yours. However, when our Trinidad neighbor's house was on fire in the year of 2001, when they ended up in a deadlock situation of their own, 18 seats to the PNM, 18 seats to the UNC. We in Tobago, we were almost like those precocious neighbors, just peeping through the window, watching as their house caught a fire. And we didn't study to wet our house back then. And guess what? Our house in Tobago caught a fire too, just 20 years after in the year of 2021, where we ended up with a deadlock situation of our very own. 6 seats to the PNM, 6 seats to the PDP. And again, it is not to say that we lack the water since back then when Trinidad's house was on fire, because Tobago is surrounded by many bodies of water, and we have water right down in lowlands for reinforcements. So we did not lack the water, but we lacked the vision. Mr. Speaker, we lacked the vision because of division. Let me repeat that. Mr. Speaker, we lacked the vision because of division. And let me explain what I mean by that. From consultations with the persons who I represent in the community of Canaan Bonaccord, and even consultations with the wider Tobago, I realize that we are divided on this issue of self-governance. So, on one hand, there are those persons who are clamoring for independence. In the middle, there are persons who are saying Tobago should have more autonomy. On this next hand, there are persons who are saying that Tobago should remain as it is. But Mr. Speaker, I came to ask the pertinent question today. If we in Tobago have three minds, we are divided on this issue of self-governance, how do we expect the legislators in the Parliament of Trinidad to really grant us the self-governance that we need? If we and all don't even don't know what we want, or we divided on what we want, how do we expect them to give us what we need? Quite frankly, the only divisions we're supposed to be having in Tobago are those divisions of education, sports, and all those other divisions, and not division on the issue of self-governance. It is too important for that. Mr. Speaker, the Bible reminds us, a house divided against itself cannot stand. And furthermore, we sing so lustily, side by side we stand when we sing our national anthem. But Tobagonians, are we really standing side by side and working together for this issue of self-governance to be passed in Trinidad? We must be in one heart, one mind, and one vision. So my role today is simply just to educate. I'm not a teacher, but I'm going to educate on why the issue of self-governance is so important to Tobago. So, in order to educate, I must bring everybody on the same page. Let me start with those on this extreme that are talking about independence. So, to those on this extreme that are talking about independence, it's simple as this. You cannot walk before you creep. You cannot awake before you sleep. You get the gist. You basically cannot put the horse before the cart. We must take things one step at a time. We can't just go from 0 to 100 real quick, because then the maths will not be mathsing. We have to take it one step at a time, and that step is to go for autonomy first. So for those on this side clamoring for independence, meet us in the middle. Let us clamor for autonomy together. Those on this side that are saying that Tobago should remain as it is, meet us in the middle as well. And since my job is to educate, as I said, you might be wondering, why meet you in the middle? Why should we be clamoring for autonomy rather than independence, or rather than saying Tobago should remain as it is? And it's as simple as this. And I want you to understand what I'm going to say. So I'm going to quickly tell you why. Let's think about Port of Spain. Port of Spain is a city, Mr. Speaker. Port of Spain is not an island. Port of Spain is not a country. Port of Spain is just a city. According to the Municipal Corporations Act, specifically Section 223, once Port of Spain Corporation makes a bylaw, the president, they send it to the president, and it becomes a bylaw one time. Let me put it in layman's terms for everybody to understand. Basically, if Port of Spain decides, okay, we're going to make a bylaw today, the corporation says we're going to make a bylaw today to say no parking on Charlotte Street on Mondays and Wednesdays, they sign that, they send it to the president, and it is automatically a bylaw. Just for Port of Spain. Let us compare the city, again, the city of Port of Spain to Tobago. When you look at the Tobago House of Assembly Act, Section 29(3) specifically, it says we need to be in one heart, one mind, and one vision, and clamor for autonomy. Because as the youth premier said, that will allow us, if we have greater autonomy, that will allow us to make more laws. And simply again, when I looked at the budget presentation, 2021 to 2022, the Tobago House of Assembly got $2.3 billion. $2.3 billion, Mr. Speaker. The Ministry of National Security got $2.2 billion. And the TTPS, well, I thought the TTPS was covered under the Ministry of National Security, but the TTPS got $2.4 billion. The TTPS got $2.4 billion. The Tobago House of Assembly got $2.3 billion. Is that fair? That is not fair. That will never be fair, and that could never be fair. Therefore, again, we need to be in one heart, in one mind, and one vision to clamor for this issue of greater autonomy for Tobago. And as I close, so I hope I did a good job of educating you on why autonomy is important, because I gave you some benefits to make more laws for Tobago, to be able to get a greater part of the budget, as the youth speaker said, as the youth premier said, 6.8%. So as I close, I want to draw us back to a story that made the headlines in 2020. That is the story of George Floyd. We all know what happened to George Floyd. He was on the ground for 8 minutes, 46 seconds, where the police officer's foot was on his neck. 8 minutes, 46 seconds. George Floyd reminds me of Tobago. Because whereas George Floyd was on the ground for 8 minutes, 46 seconds, with the police officer on his neck, Tobago has been having Trinidad on its neck for 41 years, stifling our growth and development as Trinidad has been preventing us from getting greater autonomy. Tobago, I say, we must rise up. We must stand together. This is a clarion call where we must be in one heart, one mind, one vision towards greater autonomy for Tobago. If not for you, for your children. If not for your children, for your children's children. If not for your children's children, for your children's children's children. But we must be in one heart, one mind, one vision towards autonomy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Councillor Denisha Manning.
First, I would like to recognize our very hardworking youth speaker, Mr. Delano Jofield. A special good day to my fellow assemblymen. A special good day to my fellow assemblymen, councillors, colleagues of the Tobago Youth Assembly, viewers, listeners of the public. It is with great pleasure that I stand here in this hollow chamber to speak on this motion, a motion that deals with self-governance and how it can indeed benefit the lives of fellow Tobagonians. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to start with a simple definition of what is self-governance. Yes, because I want to ensure that everyone who is listening on various media platforms can understand what we are discussing here today. Self-governance, according to Collins Dictionary, defines an organization or a region, or in this context, an island that is run by its own people without the interference of external parties. Now for me, that sounds like I just won the lotto on a Monday morning, right after spending my last $10 on 2 doubles with slide pepper. The fate of this island, without a doubt, depend on how we take advantage of the possibility of self-governance. Hence, we are here today to mind our business and make sure our beds are made first. So, we all know, in the Tobago House of Assembly elections in January 2021, ended in a shocking 6-6 draw. And yes, I started with this point to grab your attention. Now, the main question is, why did this happen? What was missed? And which stone was left unturned? The answer, connection. The connection with the people who matter. The people of Tobago. The ones who are in charge of electing the representatives that will govern us. Tobagonians are no longer interested in what you have to say. Words mean nothing. Instead of making up excuses, make things happen. Show the people that you genuinely care for their well-being, their plans, and their future generations. Because if I have a good relationship with Auntie Eunice, listening to her, checking up on her, and expressing her concerns from time to time, if I am not able to fix her concerns, she will understand because she sees effort. Of course, disappointment comes along with it, but we are all human at the end of the day. Build a connection with your fellow Tobagonians. Stay relevant, stay seen, stay connected. Don't just show up or appear because another campaign season is here. Focus on youth in and out of election season. You already know that we are the future. Treat us like that. There are a lot of brilliant minds out there that are shy and waiting to be seen. They themselves do not see their own potential. It is, of course, The job in those of authority to see the potential and take advantage of it. Build a connection, expose them to development programs and extracurricular activities. This will benefit the youth and the island by simply nurturing the future. Make youth relevant today, tomorrow, and every day after that. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, with self-governance, we can also change the way we teach in schools when coming to our history. Now, this one is a good one, so stay with me. Because the quality of our future leaders depends on our actions today. Having the ability to handle our own affairs can change the narrative of how we teach history. Now, when I was about 5 years old, I've been hearing about Christopher Columbus and his ships. They always start with Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. Now, I understand that some may appreciate the timeline of history, but it is time to mind with business. It is time to focus on our history practices, rituals, and how things came to be. We have brilliant icons like Royal Axback Titus, a man who dedicated his life to culture and reshaping the way we play speech band today. Henry and Boyo James, brothers who were responsible for the Congo Ballet. Icons, influencers, the people of Tobago. But this is only in theory. Let us shake things up, Mr. Speaker. It is time to shake things up and make Tobago interesting. We need to add hands-on experience when coming to our culture. Teach primary and secondary school students how to do the jig, an acculturated art mixed with African and British influences, or to play the tambourine drum, of course, originated in Tobago. How many young people today know about the traditional dirt oven that will make the best tasting bread across the country? When will we take advantage of our own culture to develop and educate the minds of our own people? This will build on knowledge of our own history, which will prevent the dilution of interest when coming to Tobago culture. I see no better way to pass on information. This will benefit Tobagonians by creating a real perspective and reach more persons, thus ensuring our cultural practices and social norms are preserved, which will ensure that we maintain our own indigenous identity. And on to my third point. This is the last one, Mr. Speaker, I promise. Let us focus on the development of all sectors in Tobago. We have a chance to shake things up, Mr. Speaker. The agricultural sector can flourish with access to lands and increase the availability of crops on our island. This, of course, if this occurs, we can safely say, gone are the days we go to Trinidad to make our resources available for ourselves and get quality resources. Mr. Speaker, everywhere in Tobago is right down the road. Let us make resources readily available for our own, build our own, fund our own. We can create opportunities like the ones we have now. There's the BDU grant and the REACH program grant for persons who are now starting up their business. Let us build our own. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, I would like to encourage everyone here to support this motion. Support the development of Tobago. Build on our future. Focus on our own. Make youth relevant today, tomorrow, and every day after that. Thank you.
Member for Bethel, Mount Irvin.
Now, before I get into my final submission as a sitting youth assemblyman, I'm going to tell you, Grange, thank you for your support. Thank you for placing your trust in me to represent you in such a high office. To all of you, I am immensely thankful. So, Mr. And it is this gratitude that will mold my presentation for today's debate on self-governance. Mr. Speaker, we as Tobagonians often acclaim that she becomes more beautiful. An English translation of the term Polcrya Ebony. In fact, this was Tobago's motto before being annexed to Trinidad in 1889. And it is a signature manifestation at the Tobago Heritage Festival. I want you to visualize it right now. A pregnant lady crouched down on the ground looking as if she's on the verge of giving birth. In her silhouette, though opaque, you see her beauty. You see her potential. Mr. Speaker, though she is silent, she wants to speak. She wants to be heard. But that dreaded Act 40 of 1996 has left her perturbed. Mr. Speaker, I beg to ask if a disposable mask is not covering her eyes, obstructing her vision, your vision, our vision, Tobago's vision for the future. Mr. Speaker, they say distance. They say that 6 is real, but when she asks for 6.8% of the national budget, they dissent. She is Tobago. And Mr. Speaker, I'm saying all this to say that it's time to unmask our mask beauty. It's time for self-government for Tobago. And Mr. Speaker, as I continue, I want to focus on 3 main parts of this motion. Firstly, the development of our cultural identity and tourism product through self-government, the important legislative powers that will be granted to a Tobago Island government, and creating a Tobago-centric approach towards educational discourse in this Twin Island Republic. Let me start off by making it elusively clear that Tobagonians do not want independence from Trinidad. Nowhere in either of the 2 bills speaks to secession. Rather, shaped by the cultural experiences and the unique way of life of every Tobagonian, these bills seek to bring a sense of self-determination for Tobago by Tobago. So, Mr. Speaker, you might ask, what does this mean for our cultural identity and tourism product? Well, according to Section 2, Schedule 13 on the Tobago Island Government Bill, the Tobago legislature will have exclusive lawmaking powers in the island with regards to culture and entertainment, economic planning and development, heritage and historical sites, and tourism, including levies and amenities. By giving Tobagonians this long-awaited power, we can begin to see a new era of growth and progress. Mr. Speaker, with the passage of these bills, we will have the power to determine what works best for us under the confines of the law. If this bill is passed, we will also have the legislative power to borrow money from international agencies to meet our developmental needs. Mr. Speaker, I am saying that we in Tobago can be the standard bearers for the region for cultural and tourism prowess. Think about the opportunities to be derived through investment. We are talking about job creations. We are talking about attracting foreign direct investments. And we are talking about new opportunities for upward social mobility. And Mr. Speaker, under the current THA Act, all these things are made difficult, if not impossible, without first going through Trinidad. Therefore, we see that these 2 bills seek to enshrine a newfound responsibility in Tobago by Tobago. Who can be against that? And Mr. Speaker, as I move further primarily into discussing the legislative significance of these two bills, I do so touched by one of my recent experiences. Mr. Speaker, as you would have known, I am currently studying law in Barbados, and I was privileged to witness firsthand in the streets of Bridgetown their transition to Republican status, replacing Queen Elizabeth with a Barbadian head of state. I use this comparison not to equate the two processes of republicanism and self-government, but rather to advance that people everywhere long to see themselves represented. They long to have their values and interests represented by one who has walked their path. And with the election of a Barbadian president as head of state, this effectively signifies this sentiment. Mr. Speaker, people long for representation and legislative leadership that is characteristic of real lawmaking power and not a mere assembly bill being sent to Trinidad. And this is the type of legislative leadership that is lacking under the current THA Act 40 of 1996. Tobago must be able to make laws for the peace, order, and good governance of Tobagonians. And these very bills are our pathway to this reality. This is the leadership I wish to advance. Legislation for Tobago, by Tobago. So, Mr. Speaker, as I move into my final submission on this debate, I want to touch on the third clause of the motion, speaking to a Tobago-centric approach on history education. Now, Mr. Speaker, I've heard it all. I've heard that Tobago is just a leech sucking up Trinidad. I've heard that Tobagonians too lazy and we always want more and more and more and more. And I've heard things that even protected under the standing orders of this chamber, I may not be able to repeat. So, Mr. Speaker, in my capacity as Youth Assemblyman, I hereby make a call for unity between my beloved Sister Isles. This is a call to recognize Tobago's vision, our productivity as a people, our hopes, dreams, and aspirations, and to support us in this journey to self-determination. And Mr. Speaker, it all boils down to education. For too long has Tobago's history been put on the back burner and its value starkly diminished. As the shapers and innovators of our destiny, this bill will allow us to create a more Tobago-centric approach to the curriculum on the island, which we can only hope influences the national community. Mr. Speaker, when we talk about educational advancement and Tobago, they almost seem to go hand in hand. Tobago has contributed some of the most invaluable assets, human assets to the national community, who have guided us through some of our darkest times. And with the passage of these two bills, we hope to further our commitment to the national community by doing even more. But as is obvious, we cannot do more with less. One cannot expect growth around toxic waters and a stagnant framework that does not consider our ever-progressive Tobago needs. Mr. Speaker, let this be a Tobago where we truly stand side by side. Let this be a Tobago where equity and equality prevails. Mr. Speaker, let this be a Tobago of hope and progress and optimism. My people deserve the opportunity to charter their own course. My people deserve the opportunity to enhance their contribution to the national community. My people deserve to be heard. They say without a vision, the people perish. Tobagonians, do not give up the fight seeking perfection, for no piece of legislation in itself is perfect, but rather work steadfastly, rigorously, and with a common purpose to ensure that these two bills are passed. Mr. Speaker, I close by firmly supporting this motion as read, as we seek to highlight the benefits of self-government for Tobago. Because if Tobago is to benefit, Trinidad and Tobago will benefit, and she will truly become more beautiful. As I take my leave, I would like to wish all Tobagonians a happy Tobago Day. I thank you.
Member for Roxborough Delaford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Tobago Youth Assembly has played an integral role in building youth participation in governance. Today would serve as a testament of how youth can actively become engaged in conversations pertaining to the development of this great space. Today, Youth Assemblyman Jamon Madden has brought forward this motion which seeks to validate the need for Tobago to obtain self-governance. In the astute counsel of Daniel H. Pink, control leads to compliance, autonomy leads to engagement. With that, I stand in solidarity with the mover of this motion, as I vehemently believe that self-governance would be of great profit to Tobago, namely because we would now have legislative power, a greater budgetary allocation, and increased administrative control. Self-governance, also termed autonomy, is described as control or rule over oneself according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary. Don't we want to manage our own affairs? Don't we want to boss up? I stand here bewildered to witness my fellow citizens undermine the pertinence of self-governance, especially in a time like this. Earlier this year, the Joint Select Committee brought forward the Constitution Amendment Tobago Self-Government Bill, in which consultations were held in May 2021. We witnessed a cadre of acute Tobagonians coming forward and expressing their concerns with the bill. I am proud to have been one of those persons to come forward and take a stance for the people of Tobago in the capacity of Tobago Youth Council President. Yet, in another instance, I am here to lobby for Tobago's interests using this platform. This motion seeks to find the good in self-governance. Today, it's all about positive vibes and positive energy. Let me say this emphatically. I have not come to scrutinize the self-government bill with a fine-teeth comb, but rather, I have come to offer logical perspectives on how self-governance, in its broader sense, can advance Tobago's development. Firstly, Tobago needs greater legislative control. The present THA Act 40 of 1996 gives us no lawmaking power. Don't you think Tobago deserves the right to enforce laws that are tailored to suit our unique issues here on the island? Though we intend to maintain a unitary state, I believe Tobago should have full legislative autonomy. The Self-Government Bill, as stated in Clause 10, subsection B, provides the Tobago legislature with the power to make laws pertaining to matters outlined in Schedule 2. These include health and social services, heritage and historical sites, industry, trade and business, sport, agriculture, and tourism, just to name a few. Gone are the days when we should have to depend on Trinidad to direct our future. Gone are the days when Trinidad should dictate our going out and coming in. Gone are the days when Tobago has no say in the legislative aspects of governance here. For example, laws can be developed to facilitate the ease of doing business here in Tobago. By this way, we can facilitate more foreign private investment. The youth continuously complain about the lack of entertainment options. Would our young people not enjoy a Coney Island experience? We too yearn to put on two-piece suits and splish-splash in a water park situated right here in Tobago. However, Mr. Speaker, one of the prevailing hindrances to the development of a dynamic private sector here in Tobago is that of legal impedance. I sat in a meeting with Mr. Shanti Moore, chargé d'affaires for the U.S. Embassy, and he woefully expressed that U.S. businesses face too much bureaucracy when attempting to establish businesses here, which serves as a deterrent. I am no PDP, but I must say, let me fix this. Even our local young entrepreneurs catching their nenen to prosper due to tedious bureaucratic processes. Why is it so difficult to register businesses? Why is it so difficult for young entrepreneurs to access business loans? The banks just cut in style, as we say colloquially. Hence, autonomy provides a clear pathway for the stimulation of our private sector. Mr. Speaker, as we are on the topic of legislative control, I would like to be one to advocate for the development of a Youth Opportunity Act. We can utilize the US's Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act of 2014 as a paradigm. This act focuses on providing equitable youth employment opportunities. We need something synonymous here in Tobago. Within this space, our youth face discrimination in the job market. Mr. Speaker, the word for today is experience. You want to apply to be a business operations assistant, you need experience. You want to apply to be a cashier, you even need experience for that. Just now, people might ask for experience to pull bull. To gain experience, Mr. Speaker, you must first be given the chance. Hence, policies need to be adopted to safeguard our youth through the facilitation of equal access for all. Mr. Speaker, additionally, permit me to highlight another benefit of self-governance, and that is financial liberty. Autonomy would create a greater pathway for Tobago to receive a more handsome budgetary allocation. Mr. Speaker, notably for the last fiscal, 1.9 out of our $2.134 billion allocation went to recurrent expenditure, leaving a minuscule amount for developmental projects. Mr. Speaker, more money equates to more transformation. I have dreams of brighter days, a dream which constitutes smoother roads, modern architecture, greater employment opportunities, and of course, I must mention a subvention for TYC. With autonomy, we can foster advancements in our tourism offerings. We can't expect Tobago to look as enchanting as Dubai with pauper money. Mr. Speaker, more money equals more investments, which also equals more success. Mr. Speaker, it is pellucidly clear that if anyone doesn't see the need for self-governance, that person is what I call an enemy of progress. Drunk or sober, we need to mind our business. But sadly, you know, in our Tobago space, that is something we don't practice too often. However, self-governance is warranted in this socio-economic period of uncertainty and hardship. Let we study that. Who knows, if we were autonomous, the beach may have been open for today. Tobagonians are responsible and resilient people, so we have the capacity and perspicacity to govern our own affairs. Notably, it was listed in the first schedule of the Tobago Island Government Bill that we would have exclusive administrative control over education, including curriculum development. This is a proposal that I fervently support. As an advocate for the preservation of our indigenous history and culture, I vehemently believe that cultural education should be formally introduced to our schools. The average Tobagonian youth is oblivious to the history of this very same Tobago House of Assembly. The promotion of our culture should be an intrinsic component of education here. I also propose that all secondary schools should have established cultural groups in which students can learn folk dances, practice speech band, storytelling, and other popular theoretical elements of our culture. Moreover, I will continue to lobby for the introduction of Tobago history as a compulsory subject for students in forms 1 to 3. Conclusively, self-determination is fine, but it needs to be tempered with self-control. Power comes with great responsibility. With autonomy, we can't operate like Johnny just come. We need responsible, respectable, transparent, innovative, and intuitive leaders. This is a clarion call to all our prospective leaders to remain steadfast. Ensure that policies and projects are implemented based on the needs of the island as opposed to personal gratification. Both political parties have promised Tobagonian self-governance. I have come to tell you all, talk is cheap, and you need to put your money where your mouth is and deliver autonomy to Tobago expeditiously. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Goodwood Belgarden West.
Good afternoon to the youth speaker, my colleagues, and to all viewers and listeners who are viewing these proceedings on the Parliament channel and other platforms. I want to welcome you to our third sitting of Youth Parliament. This afternoon, I embrace the opportunity to share my views on this contentious bill with the aim of highlighting the importance and benefits of passing the Constitutional Amendment Bill for Tobago Self-Governance and the Tobago Island Bill. Without any delay, I will delve into my debate as it has profoundly captured my interest ever since the issue of self-governance has become the topic on all stretches of our atmosphere. Mr. Speaker, it is imperative that we first clearly define self-governance, ensuring that it is completely divorced from the idea of secession. The conflation of both concepts by political leaders and aspiring ones has long caused confusion and conflict among the people of the island, and it must be addressed. According to Encyclopedia Britannica, establishes that local government is the authority to determine and execute policy in an area inside and smaller than a whole state. Local self-government is important for its emphasis upon freedom of the locality to decide and act. It is an acknowledgement that not all authority ought to be exerted by the center. Secession, on the other hand, is the act of becoming independent and no longer part of a country, area, or organization. With that being said, and given both definitions, my simple but logical argument for greater autonomy is that the central government cannot perform local functions properly because they have neither the time to pay attention to our local problems, nor do they have any interest in them, because they are too engaged in solving more important problems. Thus, by allocating the local functions to local bodies, the people will take keen interest in them and they will work with more efficiency and ability. To state in local parlance, the eyes of the beast of the master fattens the beast. Administrative control and responsibility and access to final resources allow Tobagonians in Tobago who reside in and know the realities of the islands intimately to address the needs of requirements for Tobago's development in a timely manner. It is the chance to practice real diplomacy for the people, of the people, by the people, and let Tobagonians lead in prioritization and decision-making based on Tobago's realities and its people's needs and aspirations. Mr. Speaker, self-governance and the level of autonomy or authority that accompanies it allows for more control and management of economic and financial matters, especially the ability to pursue direct investments, seek loans and grants from international development partners, and negotiate public-private partnerships, opening opportunities for funding to drive the development of this island. Mr. Speaker, funding for improved, robust, reliable physical infrastructure and utilities, for example, roads, bridges, water, electricity, internet, and telephony, sets the foundation for development of various productive sectors, setting a supportive environment for sustainable generation of goods and services in traditional and new emerging sectors for domestic consumption and for regional and international exports. So consider the potential improvement and expansion in tourism, better roads, better guest facilities, better communication networks, improved quality services, wider variety of local value-added products. Also in IT services, call centers, offshore services, greater participation in digital economy, sales of goods and services online. And even in creative industries, we can have improved generating arts, music, stagecraft, festival for local and regional international audience. And don't forget blue economy, sustainable fishing, more value-added products, innovation, yachting, marina, and so forth. It also means control over capital for investment in developing our human capacity via training, education, and resource for innovation, akin to Seth Godin's purple cow phenomenon. Mr. Speaker, preserving and creating Tobago's unique cultural identity, even with the context of relentless globalization, is critical not only for social cohesion, safety and security, but also for economic distinction and specialization in a shrinking global village. The legal protection through intellectual property rights, and indigenous knowledge and unique products also have economic value. Imagine Tobago's cocoa tea standing alongside French champagne, Italian olive oil, Indian almond oil, Ghanaian shea butter. In France, the AOC control designation of origin is a certification of authenticity granted to certain geographical indication for wines, cheese, butters, and other agricultural products under the auspices of the INAO, based upon the interior and a form of geographical protectionism. But even beyond that, the cultural and intellectual heritage of indigenous peoples comprises that traditional practices, knowledge, and ways of life unique to a particular people. The guardian of an indigenous people cultural and intellectual property are determined by the custom, laws, and practices of the community, and can be individuals or a clan of people as a whole. The heritage of indigenous people includes language, art, music, dance, songs, ceremony, agricultural, technical, and ecological knowledge and practices, spirituality, sacred sites, and ancestral human remains. Documentation of the following above. Mr. Speaker, there is so much more I would like to contribute on the passing of this bill, but time does not permit me to delve completely into the entire thing. In concluding, I want us to understand that Tobago has a rich history of scholarship and intellectual powers, such as A.N.R. Robinson, C.L.R. James, etc., etc. but exclusion of this information and other critical lessons or experience from Tobago's past from the modern curricula could be seen as a contributing to the erosion of Tobagonians' sense of self and understanding of identity. Autonomy to rule oneself and one's affairs comes with the assumption of intellectual capacity and emotional intelligence and fosters trust, confidence, and faith, both personal and collective. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Councillor Alia Holder.
Good afternoon to this honorable house. Before I begin, permit me to congratulate all the members of this youth assembly who would have taken up this role and responsibility of this office and indeed did an exceptional job. And also permit me to wish each and every one of us Tobagonians a happy Tobago Day. Mr. Speaker, today is indeed a sad day for all of Tobago. The mere fact that more than 4 decades later, this is still a topic for discussion signifies that those who claim to love and care about this island really don't. Mr. Speaker, 14 years of consultation and we are yet to put on our big boy pants and seek what's best for this island. It is said that a people who are not aware of the past would find much difficulty navigating and understanding the present and planning for the future. As such, permit me to take you on a small journey through Tobago's history. Mr. Speaker, it is said that in 1977, the renowned author Napoleon Raymond Robinson presented a motion in the parliament named Tobago Self-Governance, which was seconded by Winston Murray. They said that the motion didn't call for secession, but for internal self-government. And if my memory serves me right, as my grandmother would have told me, the Honorable A&R stood in Speyside on some steps and explained to the people that this bill was not for secession, but for the greater good of this island. Mr. Speaker, it's been 44 years to date and a Tobagonian opened the path for self-governance and we are still yet to see the bigger picture. When this bill was first tabled, Mr. Speaker, I wasn't even a thought nor a dream. But 44 years later, I stand here today to carry on the work of those who would have gone before me. Because I understand that development is indeed a continuous journey. As a young Tobagonian who wants to see what's best for my people and my island, I will ensure that I use all platforms to continue to fight for the betterment of this island. Imagine, Mr. Speaker, it took a tie for us to try. It took a tie for us to again focus on the importance of this Tobago bill. It took a tie to highlight the inefficiencies of the current system that we live under. It took a tie for us to try and give Tobago what Tobago deserves. The topic of internal self-governance has indeed been a long and tiresome journey. And though we would have made significant strides along the way, Mr. Speaker, we are still very far from the destination. We have seen strides such as the Act 40 of 1996, which was not totally what Tobago wanted, but it was indeed a step in the right direction. Notwithstanding that we would have again made a step in the right direction with the recent implementation of the 15 electoral districts here on the island, which means more efficient and effective representation. We are still a long way from what Tobago deserves. Mr. Speaker, as a young Tobagonian, my heart is troubled. Troubled because as I look on at what's happened with this bill, I have had to question the motives of some in our country. Tobagonians must know that this bill, while compared to the Act 40 of 1996 puts us in a significantly better place than we are in now. We should remember that the last update to the Act was 25 years ago, and as such, Mr. Speaker, it is no relevant in facilitating the development Tobagonians want to see. These bills are a step in the right direction for the growth and development of this island through our ability to exercise self-determination in our affairs. Mr. Speaker, I did the analysis. The bill needed 31 votes to further advance the development of this island of Tobago. The bill needed 31 citizens of this country to put their differences aside for the betterment of this island. However, Mr. Speaker, it seems as though some are blinded by their own personal agendas that they become a barricade which stops the path of progress. But the Bible reminds us God is our refuge and strength, a present help in times of trouble. Mr. Speaker, Tobago stood to benefit significantly from the implementation of this bill in ways such as Tobago will be able to make its own laws. Further to that, Mr. Speaker, if there is no assembly installed after 14 days since an election was held, the Chief Secretary can schedule new elections. The Chief Secretary will be able to attend meetings of Cabinet to represent the interests of Tobago. The island will be able to establish its own self-commission and Tobago civil service. This will remove the delays in filling vacancies and promotions. Tobago will have the ability to establish a fiscal review commission. Tobago will not get less than 6.8% of the annual budget appropriation. The Tobago Executive Council can borrow money locally or internationally as it deems necessary. The Executive Council will also have the power to invest in Tobago's money after receiving the approval from the Tobago legislature. This bill brings life, Mr. Speaker. The ability of the people of Tobago to fix one of the burning issues that has gripped them from centuries, that is rooted in a manner which we move from the crown colony into the civility of independence and republicanism, the ability to manage their land titles. Mr. Speaker, Winston Churchill said it best when he said, perfection is the enemy of progress. Too often people mistake progress for perfection. They spend time staring at the weeds than they do assessing the forest. They get lost in the details instead of asking whether their work is moving them in the right direction. It is not about getting it perfect. It is about getting it out the door, then adjusting from there. Voltaire, the French writer, said, the best is the enemy of the good. Confucius said, better a diamond with a flaw than a pebble without. Mr. Speaker, effective work is about moving toward a desired destination and not necessarily ensuring that nothing gets spilled or knocked over in the process. Mistakes will happen. Missteps will occur. It's a momentum that matters, and ensuring that time is not wasting obsessing over the little things that won't end up moving the needle anyway. Mr. Speaker, the question isn't how do we get it perfect, but how do we get more done? This is done by focusing on the process and not the final product. When you put too much emphasis on the final product, you fall into a trap of idealizing the end result. You begin to imagine it as this perfect end, which isn't realistic, nor is it what will most likely happen. This mindset, Mr. Speaker, will just be another roadblock in the path of progress. The truth is, tomorrow's idea will always be better. Every day you will improve and you will see what you can change, adjust, and make better. So it's not about waiting to get it perfect before you implement it. Rather, it's about getting a working version out the door then refining over time. The drive for internal self-governance won't happen overnight, Mr. Speaker. Let us band together and take what we can get at each step of the way and continue the journey to the destination we have in mind. In the end, Mr. Speaker, 3 questions must be asked. Would this bill benefit Tobago? Will this bill advance Tobago? Will this bill put Tobago in a better position? If the answer to these questions are yes, Mr. Speaker, then this country is indeed in a bad place. Because if we are individuals who are opposed to more benefits than the advancement of this island, they need to rethink the choice of not only representational politics, but the ability to lead this country. Mr. Speaker, we, the young people of this island, will continue to fight. We will continue to advocate. We will not stop till Tobago gets what Tobago deserves in our generation and generations to come. We will continue being the voice of the voices. You see, Mr. Speaker, in this fight, we will hold true to Psalms 20, verse 7. Some trust in chariots and others in horses, but we in Tobago will trust in the name of the Lord, our God, to see this through till the end. Like the Israelites who had searched in the promised land for 40 years without giving up. We will continue the journey because we are confident that he who began a good work will carry it on to completion. Mr. Speaker, I therefore wholeheartedly support this motion. I thank you.
Councillor Alex Job Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this motion. I must thank the Premier for drafting such a motion. Mr. Speaker, the first recital of the motion states, whereas self-governance would aid in the further development of all sectors of Tobago. Mr. Speaker, self-governance must aid in the further development of Tobago. It must make sense to have power and use it. It makes no sense to have the power and not use it to better Tobago. If that doesn't happen, we'll be wasting our time. But it went further to say, including our cultural identity as an island. National Geographic gave a fitting definition of culture. They defined culture as a shared characteristics of a group of people which encompasses place of birth, religion, language, cuisine, social behavior, art, literature, and music. When one examines this island, we will find everything previously mentioned in the definition. Self-governance will aid, yes, it will. However, we as a people must take the individual and collective responsibility. We must take the collective responsibility of our cultural identity, Mr. Speaker. Who can stop the will of the people? Who? We must take it upon ourselves to protect what makes us Tobagonian. Mr. Speaker, as for the language we speak, we need to embrace it. Drop the bad habit of telling people that we're backward and we talk bad and we have an accent. And if you didn't know this, every country has an accent. We speak Tobagonian, and we need to embrace this priceless and unique possession. We do not need to wait on Trinidad to tell us how to embrace our culture and what good and not good. We absolutely don't. Mr. Speaker, in the third recital, it went on to state, and whereas self-governance will endorse a Tobago-centric approach to the way history is taught in the school curriculum. Mr. Speaker, as a student who did history at this CSEC level, this is a long overdue. The history taught at the secondary school level teaches us about the Haitian Revolution and the transatlantic slave trade. Not to underscore the significance of these events in shaping Caribbean history. They are very important. However, I don't see Tobago history being taught, at least not in the way Caribbean history is being taught. Mr. Speaker, did you know that there's a Calypso Rose movie entitled Calypso Rose, The Lioness of the Jungle? What about the Swiss Robinson Family movie that was shot in the island of Tobago in the 1950s? Do you know about the former MP for Tobago East, the late Dr. Morgan Job, and his contribution to agriculture and economics here and abroad? And even this building that we are presently in, do you know that it housed the seat of governance in this island long before we were joined to Trinidad? And to add to that, it is one of the oldest legislative buildings in the region, even older than the Red House. But they would not tell you that. Under the 5th schedule, Mr. Speaker, the motion states that self-governance will endorse a Tobago-centric approach to teaching history. But when one examines Act 40 of 1996, you will swear that education is not a responsibility of the THA. Under the 5th schedule, areas of responsibility, it states that the Assembly has responsibility for education. And it didn't just say education. It went on to state education including curriculum. So if we check from 1996 to now, 25 years, the THA had responsibility and minimal was done. Mr. Speaker, all this time we depended on the Ministry of Education to tell us what to teach. Mr. Speaker, is this the textbook definition of selloutism? Mr. Speaker, I ask. This motion went on to state, be it resolved that the Tobago Youth Assembly advocate for the development of a framework that seeks to highlight the benefits of self-governance in Tobago. And be it further resolved that the report be submitted to the respective line divisions for consideration as a statement to be laid in the House within 6 months. Mr. Speaker, this is a motion I can support. However, we can debate here ad nauseum and nothing will get done. What will guarantee that when the report is laid, what will guarantee that it is taken seriously by the relevant line divisions? Well, thank God for the committed and passionate committee members who lobby for this program. Thank God. But other than that, what is to guarantee they take us seriously? If they lack the political will, it will be like throwing water on a dashing leaf. Mr. Speaker, just before I close, just to add this thing. Many of my colleagues spoke before about the increased budgetary allocation if we get the two bills passed in Parliament, the Amendment Bill and the Tobago Bill. But Mr. Speaker, right now, there's nothing stopping the government from giving us the maximum allocation, 6.9% under the Dispute Resolution Commission. There's nothing stopping them. So yes, we will get an increased allocation, but right now we have not even maximized Act 40 of 1996. Mr. Speaker, in closing, my hope that when you all say yes to this motion is that our voice be taken into consideration to make Tobago a better place. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Member for Palliative Lands from East Speyside.
Thank you, Mr. Youth Speaker, for the distinguished opportunity to address this humble House. A hearty afternoon is extended to all honorable members and by extension the viewing public. For one to adequately understand today's motion and its importance, they must first understand what is meant by self-governance for Tobago. Mr. Youth Speaker, as usual, I have engaged in constructive conversation with the youths within my constituency, and it did not take me long to conclude that many did not quite understand what is meant by self-governance or autonomy. Permit me to educate. Based on information sourced from the Tobago's House of Assembly website, this political institution has been around since 1768. You see, Mr. Youth Speaker, it was the British colonizers who felt as though Tobago needed to be joined and ultimately decided that the best island was Trinidad in 1899. Mr. Youth Speaker, the original THA was in fact designed to run the island for the benefit of its small ruling class by passing laws and statutes along with distributing land. Furthermore, in 1980, this very same institution was formed into 7 sections, each representing a developmental concern. Today, all Tobago House of Assembly structure was reconstructed thanks to the late A.N.R. Robinson, comprising of 2 main arms as we know it, the legislative arm and the executive arm. But my task today is not to necessarily bore you with historic facts. However, it is integral that I sensitize each of you about who we are and where we came from. Mr. Youth Speaker, our fight for autonomy did not begin last year or even 3 years ago. This is a fight since the time of A.P.T. James. This is a fight since the time of A.N.R. Robinson. This is a fight since the time of many political organizations that have been in government. But for some strange reason, this process has been hindered for well over 41 years. Yes, we indeed have some sort of autonomy. For me, who has only been around for 16 years, I was not aware that persons who acquired homes under NET had to travel all the way to Trinidad to make mortgage payments. Today, we are fortunate to have the Division of Housing and Urban Development and many other divisions led by Tobagoans designated to taking care of Tobago's business. But is this enough? If these divisions are prohibited from implementing policies without approval from Cabinet, why is ARIMA and the Port of Spain permitted to make bylaws while Tobago had to send to government? That we mind with business. As a matter of fact, it was former Member of Parliament Arthur Napoleon Raymond Robinson who laid the internal self-government motion in the House. This motion was seconded by Dr. Winston Murray, who noted that the motion had nothing to do with secession, but about Tobago being an autonomous island. The Constitution Amendment Bill was laid in Parliament on Friday, 9th March 2018 by Dr. the Honorable Keith Christopher Rowley and aimed to amend the Constitution and to repeal the Tobago House of Assembly Act. Mr. Youth Speaker, I have heard many ideologies of what autonomy for Tobago means. According to Google, autonomy is the right or condition of self-government. And while this is not incorrect, it is of importance that I elucidate Tobagonians. What autonomy means for us is that we will now be able to make some of our own laws. And allow me to put this into context. We are not asking for independence. Therefore, it is paramount that we be cognizant of the fact that laws pertaining to national security or whether or not we should omit the Indian arrival holiday cannot, and I repeat, it absolutely cannot be determined by us here in Tobago. This is and will remain Trinidad and Tobago, and as such, a decision like this must be considered by central government. Mr. Youth Speaker, Today, I really want to impress upon the young persons of Tobago to not get caught up in the bacchanal and kankatang. We can read and make logical analysis, and that means we will be able to develop unconstrained thoughts for ourselves. Mr. Youth Speaker, according to the revised Constitution Amendment Bill Tobago Self-Government, the Constitution will be altered to enshrine certain rights exclusively to the island of Tobago. As a result of this, Tobago will become an autonomous region free to pursue our economic, social, and cultural development. It means that Tobago will be redefined. Furthermore, what is being proposed is that the bill clearly affirms that both islands are equal, none superior to the other. Therefore, any reference to Tobago as a ward to Trinidad is to be removed from all laws or other records wherever it appears. And just to re-emphasize something I said earlier, with autonomy, the Constitution will establish a completely new Tobago legislature with the ability to pass laws for Tobago that will come into effect on assent by the President. Autonomy means that there will be an establishment in the law of the Tobago legislature to work with and manage our finances, a public accounts committee, a public administration and appropriation committee, along with a number of oversight committees to scrutinize the operations of the government. What this means is that the expenditure of Tobago's funds will be decided by us here in Tobago, both during and after the budgetary process. Self-governance will allow us to engage in curriculum reform, which will permit us to implement Tobago's history from the infant level. It will allow our future children to understand how diverse we are and teach them the importance of our heritage. Lastly, I really want us to be aware of what the new legislature will look like. Yes, we're in school today. There will be 15 elected assemblymen, a premier, 5 appointed councillors appointed by the president based on the advice of the premier, 3 minority councillors appointed by the president on the advice of the minority leader, 2 councillors appointed by the president based on his or her discretion from outstanding persons resident in Tobago, and of course, Mr. Youth Speaker, a presiding officer who may or may not be an assemblyman or a member of the Tobago Executive Council. Now, I truly wish that I could have taken perhaps an hour or two to go through the dynamics of autonomy, but time is of the rare vanilla essence, and I know my colleagues who went before and are yet to come will touch on factors that I perhaps missed. Unfortunately, none of this can take effect come December 7th, though we will have 15 elected assemblymen. I know, given the current climate that we're in, this can be difficult, but it is your duty as a youth and more so a Tobagonian to speak on these pressing issues. I am imploring that when they tell us protect your future, you take the time and ask them what autonomy means for us as Tobagonians. I am imploring when they say, let we fix this, ask them how do you plan to work on us obtaining autonomy, because the actuality of this situation is that we are yet to win this long journey. And while I do appreciate the efforts made thus far, young Tobagonians, I want us to understand that this is not an idea thing. This is not a PNM or PDP thing. This is Tobago's business, and it is time we come together, put aside our political biases, and work in unison. As such, any individual who has the audacity to ask us as Tobagonians if we think we're ready for autonomy is outright insulting our intellectual capacity. Tobagonians, we are a right-thinking people. We are an educated people, and we are certainly a determined people. And I am making a clarion call for young persons throughout this island to come together and let's fight this thing together. This is Are We Tobago. This is Are We Tobago, which is capable of change. Are We Tobagonians is capable of creating effective policies, and this very same Tobago is capable of being a first choice tourist destination. But it calls for more than excessive noise. It calls for collaboration and great commitment. We don't want to drop the ball and start this fight again next 12 years. We want it now. We do not want to start this autonomy fight next 4 years. We want to fight it now because we're rarely fixing this. We're rarely protecting our future to build the Tobago our foreparents dreamt of. It's time to rise. Let's prepare for the battle. Every man jack must get involved because we are attacking this thing with full force. And when we have done the advocating and have made the many amendments, we can all stand as one and say we have done this together. Mr. Youth Speaker, I thank you.
Member for Scarborough Codler Hall.
Thank you once again, Mr. Speaker. Now, the crafting of this motion today, it came with plenty concern. Came with plenty people wondering, but Jamun, self-governance might be a little too risky in this time, UNC PDP and them and PNM, and we don't want to look like we're supporting our side on and criticism here and there. But I said to Jason Kelly, I remember saying that to them. This is not a PNM thing. This is not a PDP thing, as Adriel said. This is not an IDA thing. This is a Tobago thing. Today I was very elated as we put aside all political references and focus on the issue of Tobago self-governance. Today I was quite elated seeing Jasha speaking about meeting in the middle. Yes, we have some that support it. Yes, we have some that are against it. But we must use our democracy to a point where we could agree and make this thing better for Tobago. We also saw Jaysha Degan speaking about the laws and the legislative aspect of it relating Tobago to George Floyd. And she could have not been more correct on that claim. We saw Denisha Manning speaking about the availability of materials to Tobago to construct. We saw Mr. Daniel Wilson speaking about the phrase that she becomes more beautiful. We also saw him speaking about the cultural identity and the tourism offerings of self-governance. Today, I implore, not the PDP, the PNM, or the IDA, I implore every member of government to see this, as Jani said, as a clarion call for change. No longer do we want to be in the back. We want to develop Tobago to economic efficiency. We want to bring Tobago back to the place where it once was. We want to make our own laws. We also saw Madam Alia Olda passionately represent the legislative aspect. We saw Mr. Alex Job Thomas speaking about selloutism, which is clearly what is evident in today's legislative aspect. We saw Adriel speaking about we are not asking for independence, but autonomy, which everybody here agreed on. And I could not be more proud today. Everybody was for the motion. I feel very proud, and if I was an emotional guy, I would have been tearing up by now. But, I just want to say thank you to the rest of Assemblyman for coming out today, for supporting this motion. And I feel very proud that we have brought this up in such trivial time. And as I'm about to finish this closing presentation, let us all support this self-government bill. Let us support Tobago autonomy, because she will truly become more beautiful. Mr. Speaker, thank you for having me today.
Members, the motion is, whereas self-governance would aid in further developing all sectors of Tobago, including our cultural identity as an island, and whereas the results of the THA January 2021 election caused an increase in consciousness and advocacy for self-governance among the Tobago population, and whereas self-governance will endorse a Tobago-centric approach to the way history is taught in the school curriculum. Be it resolved that the Tobago Youth Assembly advocate for the development of a framework that seeks to highlight the benefits of self-governance to Tobago. And be it further resolved that a report be submitted to the respective line divisions for consideration as statements to be laid in the House within 6 months. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it.
I beg to move that the House be adjourned to a date to be fixed.
Members, the question is that the House be adjourned to a date to be fixed. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. This House now do stand adjourned.